Hello and welcome to Community Matters, a podcast from the Canadian Association of Community Health Centres. I'm your host, Hillary.
On this episode of the podcast, I am joined by Jillian Roy, who is the co-executive director at Sexuality Education Resource Center, which is a community health center in Winnipeg, Manitoba. As May is Sexual Violence Prevention Month, we will be speaking about the resources offered at SERC and what can be done to prevent and support those who experience sexual violence. So please note that this conversation may be a bit emotionally difficult as we will touch on some of these sensitive topics directly. Jillian, how are you doing today?
Well, thanks so much for having us on your podcast today.
Awesome. Thank you for being here. To start off, tell us a little bit about SERC, the community that you serve, and some of the key services and programs that you're able to provide.
Thanks. SERC is a community health center with 3 offices in Manitoba. So our primary location is in Winnipeg. This is true. We also have an office in Brandon and an educator in Flin Flon, which serves our northern region. We're the only community health center in Manitoba that has a provincial reach and does programming outside of Winnipeg, which I think is important to note that we do have that wide range in our communities that we serve and the programs that we offer. We are 90 years old now. And so SERC has really changed in 90 years. We started out as the Birth Control Society, and there's a lot of history there, and we're really working through at 90 years our own internal reconciliation with that history and, the problematic place that the birth control movement played in Canada. And in part of those changes over the years, we've become SERC and a funded community health center. So a lot of changes there for sure. Our primary reach is folks that are interested in this information. And so we go all the way from, decision making early on and things around birth control and sexual reproductive health. And then we do very intentional, smaller and very specific or specialized programming in some communities. And I think we'll be able to get into some of those populations and programs later in our conversation. But basically, we serve Manitobans that have a need or interest in this information to essentially make the best decisions for themselves.
That's amazing. And at first I thought you said 9 years, but
90.
Absolutely incredible to be doing this type of work. And that's something that should definitely be celebrated, especially, ebbing and flowing and changing, with the times. And that self-awareness piece is so important. So congratulations to SERC and to you for being a part of those 90 years.
Yeah.
That's absolutely incredible. Can you share with us a little bit of, the landscape in Winnipeg and why some of these specific resources or programs are needed within this catchment area?
We offer a wide range, and a lot of the work that we do is in schools and with youth through our Teen Talk program, our youth education stream. And that information is always important. We come from a very comprehensive sexual health perspective, and also very, strengths-based and use harm reduction, and really do believe in prevention education. So getting youth even, getting into schools for grade 5 and doing puberty work and talking about consent at that age. I think it's really helpful to get folks the information and tools at a young age through that program. And so we're the only one that offers that in schools in Manitoba, outside of teachers and service providers that are mandated to provide that work. We also train teachers, new teachers and service providers to be able to do this work in a good way with young people as well. And then we also do a lot of community adult work. I think last year we saw over 11,000 adult community contacts through our services. And some of those are in the specialized programs. Some of them are through our ongoing learning hubs. So for folks that can't take trainings in person, but have the opportunity to do self-paced learning, that opportunity is there. Because Manitoba has such an expansive north, a lot of communities are difficult to reach, really literally because of the difference between the ice roads and where the planes can go and when the boats are open. So we really try to intentionally get additional services in the northern communities when we're able to as well. So outside of just the city itself, including the city of Brandon, we know that we have a lot of newcomers, and we have in the last few years seen increased populations from certain regions, areas, because of, conflicts, et cetera, that happen internationally. We work a lot with community leaders to network with those folks to make sure that they have the opportunity to participate in programming if that's something that they're interested in. And that network then grows and grows as people learn about the programming and opportunities that CERC has here.
That's incredible. Thank you for sharing. And we are going to touch on those sort of unique programs now. So when I was doing the research and looking at your website, I just thought it was very interesting that you have an Afro-Francophone outreach program, a program entitled Ourselves, Our Daughters, which I believe touches on female genital cutting, and programs for the queer community as well. And I was curious if you could share the need and information about those specialized programs and their purpose and the impact they're having on the community.
I'll start with the 2ST LGBTQIA plus program, and that one runs specifically out of Brandon and serves the Westman or Western Manitoba region. And that was born out of community need that there was really no services outside of Winnipeg for the queer community. So our educator and the teams there, they do like support groups and also like hangout kind of, social activities. They're gearing up to do all the rural prides this year. So they'll be at all the small towns providing support to folks who might just be getting their prides up and running and have been instrumental in establishing and supporting GSAs in the region. And that has been huge for increasing, safety and comfort in the Brandon area for sure. For our Afro-Franco program, we work primarily in one of the universities here in Winnipeg. I call it the University of St. Boniface. If you were French, you would say it a very different way.
And
yes. And our facilitator, Babu, he has been here for a number of years doing this work, specifically the Afro-Franco program and also our Knowledge into Action program. And he's a trained, medical professional, comes with an intense amount of education and background, is also Afro-Franco himself. So he is really the person that can do that outreach and that education. So we do meet with all the new Afro-Franco students at the university twice a year. So he'll go in, basically the start of every semester and talk about, the difference in culture of where you might be coming from versus here, and how do we sort of create that, that third culture, or like, what is it going to be like being here? What supports access information there is? What are our, rights and responsibilities, and provides that ongoing relationship with students in Winnipeg at that university. So that's great. He also works in some high schools and with other adults that might be in school, but the primary base is through the universities. That partnership has grown over time. We have struggled with that program in the sense that we've lost some of our funding for it. But again, we connect back to the values of CERC and who we are and what's really important. And so we've been able to ensure through even funding from the United Way of Winnipeg and, a little bit from the province to be able to make sure that Babu and that work is able to continue here. Ourselves, Our Daughters is a very unique program. And the more I learn about it from the coordinator and the facilitators, Simrat and Asmahan, the more I learn what the true impact is of the program through their storytelling, not just the stats that they gather, but from them actually sharing about the program itself. And so we in Manitoba, we are the one province that does not sign on to a national statement around FGC that comes from a really sort of harmful, to me, in my opinion, place where part of the national movement around FGC is about, increasing stigma, removing children, training law enforcement to, in our minds, target people from perceived affected communities. So a lot of damage is being done before people even reach our programs. When I started working at CERC a number of years ago, there was no wait list for that program. It was small, very intentional. And then that wait list grew to 50 people, and then it grew to over 200 people. We received additional money from the province to reduce that wait list after they heard our case of the importance and value of the work. And through that, the wait list increased to over 800 people. And that's because the women, children, and men that take the training program through Ourselves, Our Daughters talk about it. They talk about it in their communities. They talk about how they didn't learn that there's a way for them to advocate to end FGC in their communities here and in their home nations. They didn't know that there was a way that they could approach that, being very community based. And I think that even just seeing that wait list grow, knowing that they're having increased reach recently, shows how valuable that approach is. We are always trying to advocate for really listening to the folks in the community. And we know that when we talk about sexual violence, it's not just sexual assault or sexual harassment. There's other ways that might happen in the world, and sometimes FGC might be considered a part of that. So when folks from the communities say, we want to end this practice, 100% of folks say, we're going to talk about this with people and we don't want FGC to happen anymore. Like that is sexual violence prevention that is working in the communities by providing the opportunities to share stories and listen. I'll just share one little story that I heard recently. A participant was in one of the trainings, and it's an ongoing series, so they meet sometimes once a week. And early on, the person was pretty quiet. They weren't sharing a lot. And then they had the session on birth control options. And they learned that there was more than the one that they were given by their doctor. And they were taught some simple ways to advocate for themselves if birth control was something they were interested in. And they went back to the doctor, told them what they were interested in. They were able to change their birth control method. And by the end of the training, they shared with the group that this had happened and that other people that use birth control had that option too. And so that's the kind of like unintended result of that program that like really can create change for folks, like getting those sort of skills and even the permission and confidence to be an advocate for yourself and for your community. Like that's huge for me. So I just wanted to share that little story.
No, thank you for sharing. I think that program is like you said, so unique and it's absolutely so important. And it's great to hear that people are able to advocate for themselves because I imagine there's a lot of stigma and shame that can go on and unfortunately in a lot of things around, sexual support, safety, reproductive health, there seems to be this like cloud of shame and stigma when we try to advocate for ourselves. So it's wonderful to hear that you're able to make that change in the community that you're in.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. I mean, it's the people in the community that are doing it for sure. Yeah.
Yes. So I noticed your website is beautiful.
Thank you.
There was so much on there. I was just like, wow. Yeah, it felt almost like you don't, if you need to go in, but there was so much available there, which I thought was amazing. There was so much on, education, explaining sex, contraception, relationships, consent, STBBIs. So I'm curious why it was so important to have so much available just on the website.
Things are changing, right? We know that people are going online and maybe even less so on websites these days than they would have in the past. But because we are provincial, that's important to us to have that presence that people can access the information anytime from anywhere. One of our sort of challenges is we don't have the capacity to physically see everybody. We have turnaways all the time that we're not able to offer our programming to folks. So being able to provide that allows at least folks to get some information. We actually have three websites. So the CERC .mb.ca website is our sort of general and has a lot of information about the programs and some of the information that you just shared. We also have our teentalk.ca website. So that's the one that's youth focused and focused on service providers who work with youth. And that has even more information. So that really specific drills down and there's an activity binder that folks can like print and download and do all the activities on their own. We make that accessible to folks because we believe so strongly in our approach and the work that we do that if folks are going to be doing this work themselves too, why not take these, true and tested activities and sort of background and research and facilitate in a good and effective way. So there's a lot of information there and also ways that people can book us. We also have consentatwork.ca and we got federal funding again this year. It just started April 1 from the Department of Justice to expand a program that we ran for 5 years through that same department. That envelope funding sunsetted a couple of years ago, and that gave us a chance to sort of pause, reflect on the successes and challenges of the program we ran before, and then think about if we were going to sort of relaunch that program, where should we go with it? So our leadership team made the decision when a new call came out through the Department of Justice to put in a proposal to do our Consent at Work project with a focus on newcomers and international students. So we're just starting to launch that now. All of the previous work is available on the consentatwork.ca website. So there's posters, resources. If people are experiencing sexual harassment or sexualized violence in their workplace, what can they do? Where can they go for supports? What is the phone line that's available to them? If somebody witnesses violence or they're a bystander, what can they do? What's appropriate? Who can they talk to, and what can they share with the person that's also impacted by that situation? So I'm really excited about that. As it stands today, it's great, but really excited about where that project is going to go. And that's going to be provincial too, which is great. So we'll be able to access folks that are working in universities or in pre-employment programs to ensure that they know what their rights are when it comes to working in Manitoba and all of our role and consent in the workplace. So that's that. Yeah, I'm very excited about that one for sure. We also have now FACSA Lifeline, so folks can email in their questions and an educator will respond. And we launched TextEd, a texting text a question service, and that's also available provincially. And we can sort of see where questions are coming from based on where educators are. So we had some educators in the north a few weeks ago. And then once those educators returned, there was a significant amount of questions, and it all came from the same school district. And we're like, oh, that's because they were promoting the text a question service. And I love that folks were in class, they might not have been the one to like put their hands up and ask in front of the group, but they took that number down and we made sure that they were able to get the answers to their questions. The Canadian Medical Association, sorry, they just put out a bunch of research around the volume of misinformation and disinformation online. And it's great. If you have an opportunity to read some of what they recently released, it sort of validates our position that the more we flood opportunities for access to accurate and non-judgmental information, the more we kind of drown out and wash out some of that misinformation and disinformation. So that's why having a website available and, used, we've had, I think, over 200 hits on the youth program website last year. Those, like staying at the top, keeping information updated, promoting the text to service, text ed question. The more that we're able to do that, the more that when people encounter misinformation or disinformation, they might be more likely to reach out to somebody like us and be like, what is that? Is that true? Or like, what is that thing? Or, people might have also the confidence to share the information of like, I don't think that that's true. Because this is what CERC says. So yeah, having that information available anytime, free, at folks' fingertips, like absolutely crucial in changing the narrative around sexual and reproductive health and our rights and, everything around consent and relationships, super crucial.
Absolutely. As a similar thing was shared with the Annie Guinness Women's Resource Center that I was telling you about, and this is sort of not quite a part two, but they do sort of these conversations go together. And similarly, they were saying like that, they have to update their resources every summer because of everything changing, and to also
Yeah.
combat misinformation in schools. And so the way of the times is really trying to stay on top of this, because you can look at one TikTok and think something's happening in your body, in your world, anywhere that is
Mhm.
false. And so
Yeah.
great that you both are able to combat this the way that you are. Um, and you did touch on some of the other things that I wanted to ask about in terms of the youth workshops, the community workshops, professional development, which I thought was really interesting, and resources. And you also offer like consulting. So I'm curious what some of the successes and challenges in delivering that broad range of programs has been.
Well, I think again, one of our biggest challenges is capacity and having turnaways. We are funded from a number of streams. So like a lot of nonprofits and community health centers, we are funded in part by the province, through some federal streams like the Department of Justice right now. Our local health authority, the Winnipeg Regional Health Authority, is a major funder. We also work in a unionized environment. So outside of the co-executive directors, Leanne and myself, everybody would be considered in scope or unionized. And one of the great things for the staff and the members is that those agreements are, negotiated and ratified periodically. So with the new collective agreements, there's a lot of great benefit there, of course, but our funders aren't always matching the scales. And I'm sure a lot of folks are talking about inflation and just literally the changes in costs for delivering programming is increasing. Providing snacks and food for groups is increasing. And so our funders aren't always matching, what we're actually spending out the door to ensure services run smoothly. So that will always be a challenge. Like we always have to talk about that. We've had a lot of success with an anonymous donor that has been funding almost 100% of our northern position. And that funding is going to be ending at the end of March. And so we're constantly looking for ways to ensure that that person and that reach exists because of how expansive the province is. To have folks traveling from Winnipeg or Brandon to the northern region just isn't feasible very often. So having somebody already located there from the north, working in the north, like seeing huge success in their region, like that's something that we really need to be able to continue. So there will always be the challenge of funding, and I'm sure like all the conversations that are being had, nationally are around the same thing. There's more competition and less funding available now, and then the costs are high. So that'll always be a challenge for us. With creating the ongoing learning hub, our learning management system, that was funded by Health Canada a number of years ago to get the set up. And so we worked really hard, very condensed amount of time to get this up and running. And we do have 3 courses live on there now and another one just soon to be released. It's in the sort of final stages of piloting. That's great. But getting folks in the system to take the courses has been a bit of a challenge for us. So not having the kind of like marketing money that a private organization might have, or that sort of level of dedication to the program is difficult, because the folks that are facilitators here are often out in the community. They're, in schools and in community centers, working at the school board level. Like all of those things make it hard, for folks to be able to sort of calm down and be really strategic in those areas. So it's something that we've been working on, for quite a while, of really thinking about where we want to focus the next 5 years. So we've been, nearing the end of a strat plan, and that gives us an opportunity to think about, where we want to go. If we can increase capacity through staffing levels, providing additional services like text ed, ongoing learning hub, like those things we're able to increase the reach a bit, to still ensure that we're meeting needs of the folks in Manitoba. So yeah, lots of challenges around really, that reach and making sure that we're able to be sustainable. One thing that changed in the last couple of years for us too is that we were able to create an endowment fund through the Winnipeg Foundation. And so that was very new for us. And so we're able to provide like matching opportunities through some of our year-end campaigns, to ensure that we will have something to draw on if things are ever really tough in the world of community health centers, or funding at the national level. So yeah, working hard there.
Very much working hard. Did you want to flag any of the successes of those workshops, or if you had any anecdotes around, the professional development, the consulting, the community workshops? I mean, I feel like this whole podcast has been successes though, but if there's anything you wanted to shout out.
We were just working on finishing up our annual report, and also a lot of reporting to funders in the last couple of months. So it has given me the opportunity to see things sort of put together. So I've spent a lot of time with our staff in program meetings and at the leadership table, and so I hear things regularly. But to be able to sort of zoom out and look at what's been going on in the organization over the last year, it's not just the reach. So over 12,000 young people, like teenagers, receive this information in their classroom from us directly. And so that doesn't even include the teachers that took part in the Manitoba Teachers, like their own PD days, or all the folks that would have taken training through. We work in 6 school districts now with 6 school boards, training all of their new teachers. So it doesn't even include the folks that would have got our, very specific tailored messaging that reflects our values, but also all those other folks that might have been receiving that. So, the reach is significant, and we still don't have the capacity to see all Manitobans, right? So, success, of course, we have great folks. We have this year decided for AGM, instead of having an external presenter, which we often have. Last year we had Corey Silverberg, who came in virtually for our AGM and talked about basically the importance of books and messaging for young people, because we had seen a significant amount of pushback, specifically in Brandon, around book bans being initiated by folks, at the school board level. And so we were, had a role to play in sort of combating that misinformation that was going on then. But that relationship and sort of what came out of Brandon, that was a huge success too. And through that time, we also revamped our Brandon Advisory Committee, which helps support the work in that part of the region, because the challenges in Brandon are different than the ones that we might have in Winnipeg or the North. And so that was a success. Like a lot of our successes is built on the relationships that we have. So if it's, staff sitting on external committees, the province of Manitoba reached out to us to act as consultants in the redevelopment of the curriculum for K to 12. And we had a large piece in talking about consent education. And through that, we have started developing more consent, age-appropriate information and resources for young people. So every time our educators are out, meet with folks, that sort of increases the amount of work that we do because those relationships are so valuable. And the same thing when our folks are in communities through like Afro-Franco programming, ourselves, our daughters, our families can talk about anything. When that work starts happening and those relationships exist, again, that sort of the need grows because people are becoming more aware of us. So yeah, I don't know that I'm like summarizing that all very well, but just for me, I'd say like because we as an organization and the staff here, because we come from a place with really strong values and the staff here believe in the mission and vision, we're able to sort of next level together. So we spent a lot of this last year as staff talking about the strategic plan, checking in, where are we at? What do we want to do in the final year? Where do you think that you'd want to sort of end off this, and like what do you want to be able to continue in your work moving forward? We spent a lot of the last 2 years operationalizing our values. So we have all these things on paper, great. But what does that look like in your work? And so for leadership to ensure that at those smaller tables and even all staff meetings, when everybody travels and meets together, to be able to spend time talking about how the values play out in the work and how we could be doing things better and how we can learn from each other as a team, that's a success for me. Like being able, like that's what's helping us move through that 90 years of history, being able to reflect on the history, where we are today and where we want to go. Like that's that hard work success for me as an organization and somebody who happens to be in a position of leadership right now.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. I know that was a great summary of all of the various successes, but I did start by saying, oh, it's been a lot of success, it feels like. So I'm very, happy to have you share. And I am curious, when you're approaching the community engagement, and as I mentioned before, there does sometimes seem to be like stigma or sensitivity around these topics. How do you approach that engagement when you're addressing stuff like FGC or sexual violence, or even just, sexual awareness and education?
I would say a lot of work could look low and slow. So folks take their time. When we're meeting with a new group, a new community, a new population, we always ensure that there's somebody from the community who's doing the outreach first. So we contract folks from community to do all of that outreach support. And we also ensure that we have somebody that can do live interpretation if needed. So those things are already just our very basic level of cultural competency, just at the very start. That's how groups would begin. So yeah, having recruitment and interpretation by members of the community that will be participating in the programming. We also don't start by just getting into anatomy or getting into sexual health or talking about violence. That's not always appropriate and not always safe for folks. So it's really that, building connection in the community, in the groups, and sort of going at their pace. So I hear stories. We have an educator here who's going to be retiring this year, 30 years in the work. And so she shares stories all the time around like community readiness models, and you can theorize it all and read about it, but it's what's happening on the ground. Responding at the pace of the community is what creates that lasting impact. She shared a story one time that she was going to be delivering a session at a church. And she had the time, she had the location, she showed up. There was a bunch of people standing outside, doors locked, nobody's there. Participants start arriving, and she says, like, well, like, we can't go in. What should we do? And they said, we want to hear what you have to say. And she like opened her trunk, grabbed out her materials, and did a workshop in the parking lot. And I think that that might have been like new arrivals from Syria at the time. I can't remember that might not be true, but it was definitely a community through our families can talk about anything program. And that her commitment that she showed up, she offered to stay, and they ended up having great conversations. Like that to me is like exactly meeting that community where they were at, right? And being able to take the challenges as they come and be able to turn it around to provide what the people were asking for. Like that's huge for me. So I love sharing that little story of hers. Um, and that's a moment that she'll remember, and that changed how she operated in her work, right? So being flexible and making sure that people feel like they can share if they want, ask questions if they have. We have some funding available for translation of resources as well. So we're able to provide first language information for people. And that is huge for Manitoba. Not everybody has that opportunity to get information that is vetted through our values as well and get that kind of level of accurate information. And when we do interpretation and translation, we don't just hire a random person or a company. It is community folks. So that means that it takes sometimes longer because we'll do a focus group of the English print version about what the messaging should be, because it's not word for word when you want translation to really, make sense for folks. And then there'll be another focus group about the translated version of is it really coming across, what the message is. And so that I think creates an extra level of, sort of trust. One of our educators has always said to me, trust takes a really long time, and it could be really hard, Jillian. And you can lose that in 1 second. And so I always like hold that sentiment that it's about building that trust, being consistent, showing the communities we work with that like we really believe in the work that we do. We trust the organization. The folks that work here can speak highly of the work that they do. The community leaders that we're engaged with talk highly of CERC and respect the positions that we're in the community, the access that we have to information, resources, safer sex supplies, and networks of support are it's acknowledged. And so if we stay committed to those values, the community feels it, and then they talk about it.
Awesome. What an anecdote to just be giving a talk in a parking lot about like speaking about sex and being open about it. Honestly, hilarious, but like what a perfect way to
I
explain that
know.
families can talk about anything because you can even do it in a church parking lot. You
Yeah.
can do it anywhere. I love that. That's so funny. You did touch on this, I think, a little bit throughout for people who are actively listening. But to ask point blank, what would increased federal or provincial investment allow CERC to be able to achieve?
Further reach, right? Like that, the turnaways that we have, it's hard on our coordinators. It's hard on the leadership team. We don't like saying no to folks. So we try and prioritize as much as we can and make sure that we're able to see a good, you know, range of communities and folks, but we just don't have the capacity to have the number of staff needed to really meet the needs of folks in the province. And we advocate all the time, we do with the province, and we take federal opportunities that make sense when we can, like the money we just received from the Department of Justice. Like that, our northern position through our Teen Talk North program it would be about $125,000 to have that person per year in the north with the travel money needed to, fly to remote and more isolated communities. And that, it is a lot for an organization of our size. But in sort of the national landscape and the way that, how much things cost, like that person's reach, sort of when you break it down, the impact that that person, that one has in the north, the relationships that are established and that the trust that's built and the communities that we're able to get into that we might not otherwise, without having that person up there, that's, way more valuable. Like we know that if we were able to get increased funding, we could change some of the pieces that are aging out. Like the Teen Talk website, it's always in jeopardy of failing because the infrastructure or however that's built, whatever that kind of language is around the website, it's aging out. And so I think it's like $20,000 it would cost to absolutely revamp that. We have a very small EFT or a part-time person who is our resource specialist right now. And they're amazing. They came in, they did like a quick audit of where we're at, what some high needs resources and materials would be, and just started working on getting us sort of up to date to get things out the door. And examples like around MPOX and changes to birth control access in Manitoba and PEP and PrEP. So making sure that we have resources out. Additional funding would allow that person or even that program to be expanded so that more resources could be made and translated and that reach could go out. And I'm sure you know from talking with other folks in community health centers, especially those that come from a real prevention lens, is it makes sense financially. The more that we invest in prevention, and we say this all the time at MAC, the Manitoba Association of Community Health, the more we invest in community health and frontline services and resources, the less, the lessened burden there can be in emergency rooms and hospitals. So funding community health at a national and provincial level, it makes sense. And it saves Canadians, and in our case, often Manitobans, money by investing in organizations like ours.
Absolutely. You just stole the punchline of like my whole social media post later this afternoon, which is around why investing in CHCs is so important because it reduces emergency room wait times, taxpayer dollars. The wraparound impacts so many people. My colleague said it's like healthcare's best kept secret. And I think it's the answer to everything. I am biased. I do work here, but I've also, because of our organization, been able to go to CHCs for certain supports that weren't available actually around sexual assault, since that is the theme of this episode, because they weren't available in the province where I was from. Wait lists, wait times, it's CHCs that often come and save the day for who works at one. So I'm happy that you exist. I'm happy that Circ has been around for 90 years. I'm happy that CHCs continue to do the work. And I hope that someone listening to this will, increase the investment across the board. We'll see what this new cabinet and new government can achieve. But I hope very much that, there is increased funding because the programs you do are so interesting and they're also so important. But it's so fascinating hearing what's the landscape of Manitoba is like. It's been a wonderful conversation, Jillian. Thank you so much for chatting.
Thank you.
Just in case, I wanted to offer one last chance to share any websites. You did name several. If you wanted to share last minute, any places where people can go to find these resources, information of the programs, and what you're doing over in Manitoba.
3 websites.
Yes.
circ.mb.ca. That's our general organization's website with information on a number of our program services and how to book us or reach us. teentalk.ca is our youth stream, information for young people, written for young people and their service providers. And that's where you can get those hands-on tools and training manuals if you want to read more about our approach and how to be successful in your conversations with young people. Great website. That's a program that I worked in for 15 years before officially moving over to Circ and changing roles. And then our Consent at Work landing page, so it's like a mini website that has a lot of information around preventing and responding to sexualized violence and incidents where there was not consent in the workplace. So I think all great websites. We also are on Instagram and Facebook, so people can search SERC Manitoba and find us and connect with us there. Our newsletter, which people can sign up for online, as sent out about monthly and lots of information there. Our AGM is coming up soon. If people are interested, we'll be posting the invitation publicly soon, and so people can go there. One last thing, I'll just share that we will be having a panel of staff at our AGM, so they'll be the presenters. And instead of having a guest like we did last year, we'll be having staff talk about a little bit of the history of 90 years. We just underwent a huge research project around CERC's position and all of these, times in the movement in 90 years. So we'll have staff sort of walk a bit through that 90-year history and then share a bit of a story that they have in the work that they do that connects back to the values and sort of our growth, change, and trajectory for the next 90 years. Just a little snapshot of who we are and where we are today. I'm really excited about that being a focus for our AGM. CERC's strength, and I hope this came out in some of our conversation, but our strength is in the people that work here today and the relationships that they maintain and develop in the communities that they work in. So being able to hear from them at the AGM is an honor for me and for them as well.
Amazing. That's so exciting. I would love to see more of those reports and things after, but I will talk to you about that after I'm done hitting record.
Yeah.
But this was such a lovely conversation. You're doing
Thank you.
Amazing work. And all those websites will have popped up so people can go explore. And Jillian, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Community Matters, a podcast from the Canadian Association of Community Health Centres. To learn more about our association and the important work of community health centres across Canada, go to www.cachc.ca.